For centuries, Gethsemane has been described as a quiet garden, a peaceful backdrop for prayer beneath ancient olive trees. Yet, what if that familiar image conceals something far heavier, something hidden in stone and shadow? In this video, we follow a trail of floodwaters, buried caves, and forgotten archaeology that led Mel Gibson himself to see Gethsemane in an entirely new light. Not as a poetic symbol, but as a place of crushing pressure and unsettling truth. As we uncover what lay beneath the surface and why it reshaped the way the Passion was portrayed, pause for a moment to like the video. Share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and join us as we step inside Gethsemane and confront the shocking truth hidden there. On November 23, 1955, Jerusalem did not awaken to revelation, but to destruction. Torrential rain fell without restraint, overwhelming ancient drainage paths and turning the Kidron Valley into a violent river. Water rushed down the slopes of the Mount of Olives, forcing its way into caves that had stood undisturbed for centuries. Among them was the Gethsemane Grotto, a modest underground space long revered by pilgrims, suddenly swallowed beneath nearly 4 meters of floodwater. What generations had protected through devotion was undone in a single night by nature's force. When the water finally receded, the damage was unmistakable. Mosaic floors were shattered, sacred objects displaced, and a chapel that had stood as a place of prayer was left broken and exposed. To many, this appeared as a tragic loss, another instance of history erasing itself. Yet what lay beneath the wreckage would soon challenge that assumption. The flood did not merely destroy what was visible, it stripped away layers that had accumulated over time. Layers built by reverence, restoration, and tradition, but not by verification. In the aftermath, the Franciscan custodians of the site faced an urgent decision. The grotto could not simply be repaired and sealed again. Restoration would require excavation, and excavation meant confronting whatever the earth had concealed. As debris and sediment were removed, it became clear that this space held far more than the remnants of medieval devotion. Beneath the damaged floor were signs of much older activity, carved directly into the bedrock, waiting to be noticed. This moment marked a turning point. For centuries, Gethsemane had been approached primarily as a symbol, a place preserved by memory rather than tested by evidence. The flood forced a different kind of encounter, one that replaced assumption with investigation. Stones were no longer silent witnesses, but sources of information. The ground itself began to speak. What emerged was not a contradiction of faith, but a challenge to oversimplified images. The site was no longer protected by the distance of time or the comfort of tradition. It had been physically reopened, exposed to scrutiny in a way few sacred places ever are. The very elements that threatened to erase Gethsemane instead created the conditions for its re-examination. The flood of 1955 was not remarkable because of its destruction alone, but because of what followed. It initiated a process that would shift Gethsemane from the realm of inherited belief into the realm of historical inquiry. In doing so, it set the stage for discoveries that would redefine how this place and the events associated with it are understood. The hidden truth of Gethsemane did not surface through legend or imagination. It surfaced through water, stone, and what remained when everything familiar was washed away. For generations, Gethsemane has been described and imagined as a garden, a quiet outdoor space where olive trees stood as silent witnesses to prayer and sorrow. This image is so familiar that it rarely invites examination. Yet when the gospel accounts are read closely, something unexpected appears. The phrase, Garden of Gethsemane, is never used in the original texts. The writers speak of a place, a location on the Mount of Olives, but they do not define it as a garden in the way later tradition would. This absence is not a minor detail. In the ancient world, names were rarely poetic accidents. They described function, purpose, and use. The word Gethsemane comes from roots meaning press and oil. It does not describe beauty, shade, or cultivation. It describes pressure. It describes crushing. It names a place where something was processed through force in order to release what was valuable inside. In 1st century Judea, olive oil was not a luxury. It was essential. It fueled lamps, prepared food, healed wounds, and played a central role in religious rituals. Producing it required infrastructure, not scenery. Olive presses were often built into caves where temperatures remained stable and where heavy stone equipment could be anchored directly into bedrock. These were working spaces, marked by labor, residue, and repetition. Understanding this changes the emotional landscape of Gethsemane entirely. Jesus did not withdraw to a decorative garden arranged for reflection. He entered a functional space associated with grinding, weight, and output. The environment itself carried meaning. The smell of old oil, the cold surface of stone, the presence of machinery designed to apply pressure would have been unmistakable. This was not a neutral setting. It was a place defined by what it did to what entered it. Tradition gradually softened this reality. Over time, prayer replaced production, and symbolism replaced structure. As centuries passed, the physical identity of Gethsemane blurred, reshaped by devotion rather than definition. The idea of a garden was easier to hold than the reality of a press. Yet the original name never changed, even when its meaning faded from view. The rediscovery of Gethsemane as a place of pressing forces a recalibration. It does not diminish the spiritual weight of the moment described in the Gospels. It intensifies it. The agony experienced there no longer unfolds against a gentle backdrop, but within a space built for crushing what is whole in order to release what is essential. This reframing reveals why the name matters. Gethsemane was never meant to be understood only as a location. It was a description. And once that description is taken seriously, the scene that unfolds there can no longer be seen in the same way. Gethsemane was not chosen at random, nor was it selected for its atmosphere alone. Its location on the Mount of Olives placed it at a precise threshold, close enough to Jerusalem to remain within reach of the temple, yet just outside the city walls. This position mattered, especially during Passover. Jewish law required pilgrims who came to Jerusalem for the feast to remain in or near the city overnight, and the slopes of the Mount of Olives became a natural extension of that sacred boundary. During most of the year, caves on the Mount of Olives served practical purposes. In autumn and winter, they were active centers of olive oil production. Workers gathered there to crush and press the harvest, filling the air with the sound of stone against stone and the scent of fresh oil. By spring, however, the presses fell silent. The season had passed. The equipment remained, but the labor was finished, leaving behind empty, sheltered spaces. This seasonal rhythm explains why such a cave would be available on the night of Passover. Jesus and his disciples, coming from Bethany after the meal, needed a place to remain until morning. They did not require comfort or ceremony. They needed shelter from the cold night air and protection from the frequent spring rains. An unused olive press cave provided exactly that. The choice of this place reflects practicality rather than symbolism. Yet the symbolism emerges precisely because of that practicality. Gethsemane was familiar territory. The Gospels imply repeated visits, not a single dramatic arrival. It was a known refuge, not an improvised hiding place. The cave offered separation without isolation, privacy without distance, and stillness without abandonment. Early Christian memory preserved this specificity. From at least the 4th century, pilgrims were guided not to an open garden, but to a particular north-facing grotto on the Mount of Olives. This cave, not the surrounding trees, became the focal point of devotion. Over time, it was adapted into a chapel, marked by altars and mosaics, yet its essential form remained unchanged beneath later additions. As centuries passed, new structures were built nearby, most notably the Church of All Nations. Gradually, attention shifted. The cave was remembered more for what happened after the prayer than for the prayer itself, while the church came to represent the scene of agony. This shift did not erase the original site, but it blurred its identity. Understanding Gethsemane as a cave anchored in daily life restores clarity. It situates the final hours before the arrest not in an idealized landscape, but in a real, usable space, shaped by work, seasons, and necessity. This grounding prepares the way for what the earth would later reveal, when the surface was stripped away and the cave was forced to speak for itself. The devastation left by the 1955 flood demanded more than cosmetic repair. The Gethsemane grotto could not simply be restored to its previous appearance without first addressing what the water had exposed beneath the surface. This responsibility fell to Virgilio Corbo, a Franciscan friar and trained archaeologist, whose task extended far beyond preservation. He was not rebuilding a shrine. He was excavating a site whose history had been sealed by centuries of devotion. As Corbo and his team began removing layers of mud, rubble, and collapsed flooring, they encountered the first signs that Gethsemane held a deeper past. Carved directly into the rock were dozens of tombs, both Christian and Muslim, some dating back more than 1,000 years. These burials were not random. They reflected a long-standing desire to rest near a place believed to be sacred, suggesting that the grotto had been venerated continuously across religious boundaries. This discovery alone challenged the notion of Gethsemane as a late or symbolic invention. Burial near holy sites was a deliberate act, reserved for locations believed to hold genuine spiritual weight. Yet the most significant findings lay deeper, beneath the remains of the chapel itself. When Corbo lifted the damaged medieval floor, he uncovered structural features that had nothing to do with worship. Embedded in the cave wall, directly beneath where the altar had once stood, was a circular niche carved into the stone. Its dimensions and wear patterns matched those of known first-century olive presses. The wooden beam that would have extended from it was long gone, consumed by time, but the stone told a clear story. This was not decorative architecture, it was industrial. Further examination revealed the scale of the original operation. The cave was not an improvised shelter, but a purpose-built workspace. Its walls, ceiling height, and internal layout were consistent with other olive press caves from the same period. Gethsemane had been a place of production long before it became a place of prayer. Corbo documented these findings meticulously, resisting the temptation to dramatize them. His work was methodical, grounded in comparison and evidence. He did not claim to have proven the gospel account. Instead, he established something equally important. The physical reality of the site aligned with the meaning of its name and the historical context of the time. By the end of the excavation, Gethsemane could no longer be understood as a symbolic garden shaped solely by tradition. Beneath layers of reverence lay a working olive press, preserved in stone. What had once crushed fruit for oil had also shaped the space where one of the most intense moments in the gospel narrative unfolded. The ground itself had recorded the truth, waiting for the moment when it would finally be uncovered. As the excavation of the Gethsemane grotto continued, it became clear that the olive press was only part of a larger, more complex structure. One of Virgilio Corbo's most significant rediscoveries was the original northern entrance of the cave, long sealed by later constructions. Nearly 5 meters wide, this entrance opened directly toward an ancient olive grove, confirming that the grotto had once functioned as an active workspace connected seamlessly to the surrounding landscape. This detail carried weight. The alignment between cave and grove was not incidental. It reflected efficiency and design, reinforcing the conclusion that Gethsemane had been a place of labor before it became a place of memory. Yet even as these connections came into focus, new questions emerged that archaeology could not immediately answer. While clearing the southeastern section of the cave, part of a wall collapsed, revealing a hidden chamber that had been untouched since the Crusader period. This space had been deliberately sealed, forgotten not by accident, but by history. Inside, Corbo encountered a puzzling layout. The limestone floor sloped downward at a deliberate angle, carved with shallow grooves and small depressions cut into the rock. At the time, no clear explanation presented itself. The features did not match known burial practices, nor did they resemble common architectural supports. Corbo considered the possibility of storage, perhaps for tools or supplies, but the precision of the carvings suggested a more specific function. Rather than forcing an interpretation, he documented the chamber carefully and left its purpose unresolved. This restraint proved critical. Too often, sacred sites are burdened by certainty imposed too quickly. Gethsemane resisted that impulse. The chamber stood as a reminder that evidence does not always arrive fully interpreted. Some truths require distance, comparison, and patience before they can be understood. The existence of this sealed space hinted that the grotto's role extended beyond what had already been identified. Gethsemane was not a single-function cave. It was a system, adapted for multiple stages of production, movement, and preservation. The unanswered questions did not weaken the site's credibility. They strengthened it by revealing complexity rather than simplicity. In this moment, Gethsemane remained partially concealed, even after being reopened by flood and excavation. The olive press had been confirmed, the entrance restored to memory, yet one chamber remained silent. Its meaning would not be clear until future scholars returned to Corbo's notes with new context and comparative evidence. What lay hidden in that sealed room would eventually become one of the most revealing elements of all. But for now, it stood as a boundary between what had been uncovered and what still waited beneath the surface. Decades after Virgilio Corbo completed his excavation, Gethsemane was revisited not with shovels, but with questions. Matthew Gray, a scholar specializing in the archaeology and daily life of first-century Judea, returned to Corbo's original reports, written in Italian and often overlooked outside academic circles. What he found was not error, but unfinished interpretation. The evidence was there. It simply needed to be read within the right framework. One of the most persistent questions concerned the olive press itself. While Corbo had identified the niche where the pressing beam would have been anchored, a key component seemed missing: the crushing basin where olives were first ground into pulp. Without it, the picture felt incomplete. Gray approached the problem spatially rather than symbolically. Near the original northern entrance, Corbo had documented a large stone structure, classifying it as the base of a fourth support column. Gray noticed something different. The dimensions, position, and wear patterns of that structure matched known crushing basins from other first-century olive presses. Its location near the entrance made practical sense, allowing olives to be processed immediately after being brought in from the grove. Gray proposed that this was not a column base at all, but the foundation of the missing basin. Over time, pilgrims may have dismantled it, carrying away fragments as relics, a common practice at revered sites. What remained was the footprint, silent but precise. Gray's reinterpretation did not stop there. Corbo had also identified an underground chamber, accessed by an exterior staircase, labeling it a water cistern. Gray re-examined its features and context and reached a different conclusion. The structure fit the requirements of a mikvah, a Jewish ritual bath used for purification. This detail carried significant implications. Oil intended for use in the temple required ritual purity at every stage of production. Workers would need a mikvah nearby to maintain that purity. This insight reframed the entire site. Gethsemane was not merely an agricultural installation. It was part of a sacred economy, where physical labor and ritual preparation were inseparable. The press, the basin, the mikvah, and the storage areas formed an integrated system governed by both practicality and religious law. Gray then turned to the sealed chamber with its sloped floor and carved grooves. Comparing it to similar installations discovered at other sites, he identified it as a specialized oil storage facility. The grooves directed spilled oil toward small depressions that once held large jars. Nothing was meant to be wasted. Every drop mattered. Through Gray's reinterpretation, the unanswered questions left by Corbo found coherence. Gethsemane emerged not as a simple cave, but as a carefully organized space designed for pressure, purity, and preservation. This clarity would soon deepen the symbolic weight of what happened there, as archaeology and meaning converged. With the structure of Gethsemane fully understood, its meaning begins to shift from background to participant. This was not merely the setting of Jesus' agony, it was an active metaphor embedded in stone and function. An olive press is a place designed for one purpose only: to apply pressure until what is hidden inside is forced out. Nothing about it is gentle. Heavy stone wheels grind fruit into pulp. Massive beams bear down until resistance gives way. Only then does oil emerge. In this environment, the events described in the Gospels take on a sharper clarity. Jesus did not pray in a neutral space detached from daily life. He prayed in a place defined by crushing. The physical reality of the cave mirrored the internal weight he carried. The silence of the press during spring did not erase its identity. The marks of pressure remained etched into the rock, visible reminders of what the space was built to do. Freshly pressed olive oil often carries a reddish tint, especially in its earliest flow. This detail, well known in antiquity, adds an unsettling dimension to Luke's account of Jesus' sweat becoming like drops of blood falling to the ground. The Gospel does not explain the phenomenon, but modern medicine identifies it as hematidrosis, a rare condition caused by extreme psychological stress. Under unbearable pressure, capillaries rupture, mixing blood with sweat. The parallel between body and press becomes difficult to ignore. Mel Gibson was among those who recognized the power of this convergence. When preparing The Passion of the Christ, he did not treat Gethsemane as a symbolic garden detached from reality. He understood it as a place of compression, where decision preceded violence and surrender came before arrest. The agony was not only about fear of physical pain, it was about acceptance under weight. In the cave, surrounded by the remnants of a press built to extract oil for light, healing, and anointing, Jesus confronted what lay ahead. His prayer was not an attempt to escape pressure, but a moment of submission within it. The setting reinforced the choice. Just as olives do not decide whether they will be crushed, Jesus faced the full weight of what obedience required. The presence of the disciples heightens the contrast. Nearby, they slept, worn down by the feast and the hour. The press was silent, but the weight had not lifted. Alone, Jesus carried what no one else could bear. The angel who appeared did not remove the burden. He strengthened Jesus to endure it. This moment marks the true beginning of the Passion. Before the betrayal, before the trial, before the cross, there was the press. Gethsemane was where resistance gave way, where purpose was refined through pressure. The cave did not witness a breakdown, it witnessed a yielding. Understanding Gethsemane this way reshapes the meaning of sacrifice. What was poured out later on the cross was first pressed out in the cave. Oil does not flow without crushing. Light does not come without pressure. Gethsemane reveals that the path to redemption did not begin with nails and wood, but with weight, choice, and a place built for pressing until nothing remained withheld. Gethsemane does not conclude with the arrest. Its meaning stretches beyond that night, because what happened in the cave shaped everything that followed. Before the torches appeared and betrayal took form, a decision had already been made in silence. The cross did not begin with nails or wood. It began with surrender under pressure. Nothing outwardly dramatic occurred in Gethsemane. No crowds gathered. No voice from heaven interrupted the darkness. The disciples slept nearby, exhausted and unaware of the weight of the moment. Yet this quiet was deceptive. Gethsemane was where resistance ended and purpose was sealed. It was the point where obedience replaced escape, where the path forward became irreversible. This is why Gethsemane speaks beyond theology. It reflects a universal human experience. Everyone encounters moments of pressure that do not announce themselves as turning points. They feel ordinary, heavy, and private. Like the cave, they seem insignificant until time reveals what was decided there. Gethsemane shows that transformation often occurs in hidden places, long before consequences appear in public. The archaeology of the site reinforces this truth. Gethsemane was built for process, not beauty. Olives entered whole and left transformed. The press did not crush without purpose. It applied pressure to release what was essential. In that sense, the setting becomes a mirror. Pressure does not create character, it reveals it. The failure of the disciples to remain awake sharpens this contrast. Even those closest to Jesus could not stay present in the hour of greatest weight. Their weakness reflects a familiar human pattern. We often withdraw or become numb when pressure intensifies. Yet the narrative does not end in condemnation. It moves forward in fulfillment. When Judas arrived, betrayal did not initiate the passion. It confirmed a decision already made. Gethsemane ensured that what followed was not chaos, but purpose unfolding step by step. Archaeological evidence supports this reading by anchoring the event in a real place shaped by discipline and intention. The olive press, the ritual bath, and the storage chambers all testify to order beneath the suffering. Oil once produced in that cave gave light, healed wounds, and consecrated what was sacred. The gospel declares that something greater was poured out there, something that continues to bring light into moments of pressure and uncertainty. Gethsemane stands as an invitation not merely to observe suffering, but to recognize it as a place where transformation begins. If this exploration has helped you see Gethsemane with new clarity, take a moment to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more deep explorations like this. Thank you for watching and for staying with us to the end of this journey into the truth hidden in Gethsemane.
Diving into the deep research for this project generally shifted my own perspective. We often accept familiar, softened image of history without question, but uncovering the archaeological reality that Gethsemane was an industrial place built for crushing, not merely a quiet garden for reflection, was profound. It reframed the entire narrative from passive sorrow to an active, agonizing surrender under immense physical and spiritual pressure. This isn't just unseen history. It mirrors how we face our own defining moments of weight. If this harder look at the truth resonated with you, please don't just watch silently. Engage. Hitting the like button helps this message spread. Share your own reflection in the comments below and subscribe to join us as we continue to digging past the surface.